In Sister Location, we know that the Funtimes are haunted. Not only are they aggressive to you, the player, despite their programming telling them to target children, but also in the Scooper ending, Baby says,
"There is nowhere to go when we look like this,"
implying there are multiple children possessing these suits. Although it's not confirmed, we can almost confidently say these aren't the MCI kids. Just compare Ennard and Molten Freddy. Molten Freddy clearly has much more wiring which contains Remnant. So while I do agree with Molten MCI, I don't think the MCI victims are in Ennard. Which raises the question, who is? Well, what if I told you that one ward, yes, one single ward in FNAF recontextualizes everything and we all missed it? Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at the final cutscene in Sister Location. Listen carefully to what Michael says here.
They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
Did you catch it? One more time.
Didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
It's clear here that the animatronics mistook Michael for William here, which means that— Wait. Recognize? Why would they recognize Michael? For you to be able to recognize someone, that means you must have seen them before. Have the kids in the Funtimes seen Michael before? Do they know him? Well, assuming they do, we have two possibilities here. One, we've seen these kids before, and if we look close, we might find out who they are. Two, we haven't seen these kids before, and we can't find out who they are. I'm gonna go with option one here because that gives us much more room to work with. If we assume that we know these kids, this actually narrows down our options. In fact, it narrows it down to one set of kids. Which set of kids do we know for a fact would recognize Michael and we've seen before? The neighborhood kids. Balloon Kid, Toy Girl, This Laughing Boy, Ponytail Girl, and Spring Bonnie Kid. Also, I have a video that explains that this girl here is actually Elizabeth Afton. I even explain why her eye color changes. You don't need to watch it, but just know that I think this girl is Elizabeth. Cool? Okay, what other piece of evidence do I have for this theory? Well, take a look at the similarities between Ponytail Girl and Circus Baby. Same hairstyle, same dress, almost everything is the same except for the eye color, which we know Baby's eyes were originally blue, not green. They're so similar, in fact, some people would say this girl is Elizabeth. But we know she isn't because she tells Dave, "See you at the party," at the end of her conversation. If she was his sister, she wouldn't see him at the party. A few days later, she'd see him back home. Anyways, back to the similarities. You have to wonder why Scott made them look so alike. My answer? Baby was meant to appeal to this girl so she could kidnap her. But William's plan backfires and Elizabeth is the one to get scooped up by Baby. These similarities are Scott's way of showing us William was trying to lure the neighborhood kids because they were easy targets. They were nearby after all. The breaker room map shows that the neighborhood is very close to the Sister Location bunker. And maybe William knew that they bullied his son, who died tragically a few days later. And this was his way of getting revenge. So William kidnaps them and experiments on them before killing them and distributing the remnant across the Funtimes, the Biddy Babs, and the Ballerinas. I think the strongest piece of evidence for this is that Michael used recognize. Either Scott needs to go back to 4th grade vocab, or this was an intentional clue. I mean, if these kids aren't part of the Funtimes, then in reality, they don't serve much to the plot. They all basically do the same thing. Make fun of Dave and tell him, "See you at the party." Michael does that already. But I personally think they were shown to us here because they serve a greater purpose to the story. They're William's victims. They're more proof of how truly evil William is. Also, while we're on the topic of the Funtimes and the experiments, I want to throw in a bonus theory. When does the FNAF 4 gameplay take place? Trust me, this is related. We know that it must happen after FNAF 1 since we hear one of the phone calls as an Easter egg. But being after FNAF 1 isn't very specific, so let's dive deeper. Let me quickly point out something that might help us here. In FNAF games, there are usually 5 cutscenes between nights. Usually. There's 4 in FNAF 2, 5 in FNAF 3, 5 in FNAF 4, and 7 in Sister Location. That's weird. Why would Scott randomly go up to 7? You could have easily just made this game 5 stages of decaying and we get the point. Well, let me ask you this. How many nights do we play in FNAF 4? Well, like the 3 games before it, 7 nights. My theory is that the FNAF 4 nightmares happen in between these cutscenes. In Sister Location, using this keypad, you can find out William has been running experiments using the FNAF 4 house. He likely runs these on the children in the Funtime since in the Sister Location trailer we hear,
"You don't know what we've been through."
And these kids eventually all combine into Ennard. So in the FNAF 4 gameplay, Michael isn't having nightmares from when he was experimented on as a kid, like some tend to believe. No, since Ennard is inside him, the agony of all the kids that were experimented on is active in his body and in his mind. These are their nightmares, what they went through. If you're skeptical, I have one nail in the coffin here to convince you. In the FNAF 4 trailer, we see these lines. What is it you think you see? What game do you think you're playing? And last but most definitely not least, what have you brought home? What has Michael brought home? Ennard. And Ennard is giving him these nightmares. When Ennard leaves his body on the 7th night, the nightmares stop. In every other game, we're given a reason why we stop playing. FNAF 1 and 2, the player gets fired. FNAF 3, Fazbear Frights gets fired. In Sister Location, we get Scoop, and in FNAF 6, everyone gets fired. But in FNAF 4, the nightmare just kinda stopped. The only explanation I could see for this is if you believe that these nightmares are the crying child's and they stop when he dies. But knowing what we know now, that's very unlikely. To summarize here, Michael says the Funtimes didn't recognize him, which is proof they must know him or they knew him at some point. The only kids we've seen that would be familiar with Michael are these neighborhood kids, which makes them likely candidates for the kids William experiments on and later puts the remnant in the Funtimes. On top of that, it would make sense that when Ennard is in Michael's body, that he begins having nightmares of the experiments they went through. I know it's a bit unconventional to have two theories stuffed into one, but they seem to work together and didn't want to make them two separate videos because it would be really short each. So anyways, thank you for watching.